I call the February 8th, 2024 regular meeting of the Issaquah School Board to order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag So our first item on our agenda is public comment. Is there any public comment? Is there any public comment on Zoom? Yeah. Great. I just can't see them.
Hello. Should I start or?
Yes, please. If you'd say your name and attendance area, that would be great.
Yeah, my name is Jules Loeffler. I'm a school-based mental health counselor at Issaquah Middle School. So part of my job is working with students to decrease anxiety around school by helping them create plans to turn in missing work and to do ongoing work. However, this can be challenging since some students still struggle to navigate Canvas. Since the to-do list on Canvas homepage only shows about 7 total items, for students who are very behind, it can be tricky to know about upcoming assignments, which contributes to even more school stress. The current solution is helping these students get back on track is by referring them to their school's Swedish or academic counselor, or have them placed in a study skills class. And this puts extra strain on both counselors and teachers when classrooms feel overwhelmingly large. Currently, our Communities and Schools Liaison is working on setting up an executive skills drop-in workshop during homeroom time to help mitigate the stress. In previous years, students would receive a planner at the beginning of the year and go to binder boot camp where they learned how to use it. Currently, only 6th grade students get planners, with any extra planners going to students in the study skill classes, and there's not really any tier 1 organizational skills education. I truly think that continuing to use binder bootcamp or some other form of organizational and education and executive functioning training during homeroom time and giving every student a planner can be incredibly beneficial in helping students keep up with their workload. This education can include learning how to input Canvas due dates on the Google Calendar and setting up reminder notifications and helping students explore different ways of planning out their work. Ultimately, I do think this would benefit all middle schoolers in learning a variety of ways to organize their work, including those who are keeping up with their workload, and especially our neurodiverse students. Your time.
Thank you so much. Is there any other public input? Okay, seeing none. Next item is approval of the consent agenda.
I move the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. There it goes. Next is establishment of the regular agenda. Are there any changes to?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Perfect. First item is a recap of our work study. So thank you to Director Mullings for facilitating the work study for the past 90 minutes prior to this meeting. I really appreciate it. It was focused on a update and discussion that our board and superintendent and her team had regarding the strategic plan and sort of kind of midway through that first year. So I don't know if you wanted to do any opening remarks before we then ask them how it was.
I'll just start by saying I appreciated the board discussion to continue to further make the connections between how the strategic plan supports the district's goals, which are defined by the board in the form of our ends and our mission and the vision itself. And our team did a phenomenal job of sharing and engaging in dialogue to help provide context and clarity. And also we took feedback about how we might prepare to monitor the mission, which is ends 1.
Great. With that, I wanted to open up to board for thoughts.
So I'm happy to go. I think maybe first and foremost, I really appreciate the amount of time we've been able to have of late in work study in general. I think it's provided us a really good opportunity to go deeper on some really critical and important topics, to take the time to kind of level set on topics, on data, on approach, particularly with having our two newer board members, and just to refresh on what's important and why to each of us. So that's my first note of appreciation. I think this evening, obviously we have our mission as a district and we have our ends for our students, and the strategic plan is really the enabling how of that all gets done throughout the district. And so I'm looking forward to having a cycle where we can use that strategic plan as a way to monitor our progress toward accomplishing those ends. So I think tonight, our work study was important, just to have an opportunity to say, well, what is important to each of the members on the board? What information is going to be important to each of us, proactively sharing that as we go into the process, I think in a couple of weeks, maybe, on monitoring this area.
Thank you. Dr. Morado.
I think I'm kind of falling into being the board historian. So being able to give that reflection of where have we come from as the board has transitioned the people that are on it, but how the goals have been similar, about how do we really utilize our governance model of policy governance to really manage and work through the district, being able to ensure that how do we tap into, here's some goals that we've set, and here's the direction of the district, and being able to define who's doing what on the, whose role is what. And that the strategic plan really has given the superintendent the structure she needs to ensure that the organization is making reasonable progress on the goals. And so that is really, I appreciate that, being able to just do a review that, do we still feel that there's that connection? And, so being able to discuss about what do we think is missing, what do we think is really kind of hitting that connection for us, and being able to see it in the work. So I think it was a great conversation. Really also hearing from my new board colleagues what they see, being able to answer those questions. So I appreciate that ability to go back in time for them. But, I'm really looking forward as we move forward, the insights that you're bringing to this work. And because with new eyes come questions, and I don't think that there's any, basic questions. I think a couple of times Matt said basic. It's not basic. It really is fundamental. And so I do appreciate that, because it makes us sit back and make sure we're on track, and that what we're doing is understandable for the public. We are a public school system, and the public has a right to know what are we doing to ensure that we are giving them the best quality education for the future community members, our current students, but our future leaders of our community. So I think all of that's kind of important.
I would just like to say, I'm incredibly thankful, just echoing what Director Mullings had to say, but incredibly thankful to have the opportunities for these work studies, being new to the board, being able to really dive into topics, deeply, and to be able to ask the fundamental questions that are top of mind. So that it's really, really helpful. As to the strategic plan, I'm hugely supportive of this work. I think it's key to prioritizing for the district. And it's just clear you've done a lot of really thoughtful work tying the strategic plan to our governing policies. So I'm highly encouraged by all of this work, and I'm really eager to see it move forward. And then the other thing I would just like to say is I think the administration's done a really smart job of having various people work outside their traditional silos in addressing different portions of the strategic plan. I think that's just a great way to kind of cross-pollinate, and learn as you go, and for people in the district to learn other areas that need improvement.
I want to echo what the other board directors have said. And I want to just touch on too, the fact that I've really appreciated the work study sessions that have been put in place. And it was a newer board member. It's really helpful to hear from the more tenured board members, particularly on the strategic plan today. I just am very fortunate that we have a district that's put together such a wonderful roadmap. And it was good to hear, again, from the tenured board members, what's most important to them. And then also have the superintendent and the cabinet also weigh in on that as well. And just another note, and I'm sure, that Director Taylor feels the same way, but coming in as a newer board member, again, this work study time is important, but then all the additional time that our fellow board members have spent with us, superintendent, cabinet, we just really appreciate that time. So thank you. Yeah.
I know it's been a heavy lift, and I am grateful for you on behalf of our community. I think that sometimes people forget just the challenges of running a school system every day. And like from when students get on the bus to when they get off the bus requires a lot of work. And as other board members have said, this really has brought into focus what the prioritization is and the how and how you plan on stepwise to get to those goals that we want to make reasonable progress to. So on behalf of our community, thank you for all of that work. So the only thing that I was thinking is I would love, since you did your team did such a very large, detailed report, if we could put that up on our board agenda under the work study, so then it would be there to live and for future would be helpful. So thank you. So did you have any other final reflections after hearing?
We absolutely can do that. And that'll be a good opportunity to continue to provide information to the community. As well as I want to echo again, thank you to all the team members that are leading the strategy, priority areas, and the strategies themselves, because it takes many people to be able to make that work go. And the collaboration that's happening is phenomenal. And I'm just very grateful to work with really amazing people.
Thank you. The next item is works in progress. So superintendent.
All right, I'll be brief because a lot of our works in progress are handled also through our agenda topics. But I'll start with a few key updates and announcements. So registration is open for kindergarten. And just as a note, the earlier we do receive registrations, we can plan effectively for staffing and also support families who are making the transition to having a child in school for maybe the first time in our school district. So the more we know, the more we can plan and the more we can support our families. And that's an important note. Also, Gibson Eck applications are also now open through February 29th. The school hosted a successful open house in January with families and students who are excited about Gibson Eck's innovative program and opportunities. As a reminder, acceptance into Gibson Eck is through a lottery, which will be held on March 1st. And a new cohort for the class of 2028 will be announced on March 4th. And all this information, application links are all available on the Gibson Eck website. I should also note that our elementary schools and principals and team members have been doing a phenomenal job of hosting these welcome events for kindergarten families as well. And there's been partnership with the PTSAs and many different team members at each school site. And tomorrow, I want to highlight that our students from Liberty, Issaquah, and Skyline are all attending the Great Careers Day at Renton Tech. So that should be a pretty awesome opportunity to continue to further learning about what career opportunities are out there in very tangible ways. And that's a wonderful event that will be happening tomorrow. And I have some very brief updates because, February, it's a leap year. And so I'll be short as well. It's a short month, even though it's a leap year. So we do have a midwinter break, and I'm at some national conferences this month to represent the district to share all the amazing work that we are doing. And because this is a busy time of year, there's a lot of high stakes work that's happening concurrently as directed and supported in support of the board and our student staff and our community. I do want to highlight a couple of things that have been happening because they're happening very quickly and in rapid sequencing. So we have some design sprints that I've talked about before at our board meetings. We had our first one last night. 2 nights ago. I'm forgetting where I am in the week. Julia Bamba facilitated the first design sprint. And she was supported by Naomi Wu, one of our student representatives to the board in that facilitation, and many other students. But we had about 20 participants. I was grateful to join a table group with a high school student and a middle school student who joined with her mom. And we had fun and we just got creative. The purpose of the design sprints are to dream and think big about school innovation. And anyone and everyone, especially students, all ages, even we had a second grader attend. It is very powerful to have the voice of students at multiple parts of their journey in our school system. We want you all to attend. And the next one is Issaquah High on March 5th, and then Liberty on March 7th. So both of those will start at 5:00 p.m. and they'll be held in their libraries. I'm continuing to conduct empathy interviews, and these are a true gift. They are a gift of learning from another person and sitting in deep listening. By hearing different personal experiences, in particular, I've been focusing on alumni of the school system as well as our staff team members. And I want to thank all of those individuals who are either participating as interviewers as well as interviewees, because it is a reciprocal process, although it is a lot of listening. It is a very powerful opportunity. Our team is working hard to prepare for next year, as I've continued to say, and that we also have a board retreat coming up in March. So that's another opportunity to continue to go deeper with discussion for the board and support of the board. We had our regular cabinet meeting, and as part of our time to be in schools, we had the opportunity to visit Issaquah Valley Elementary School and enjoyed seeing the incredible work happening with their breakfast program, as well as to witness the growing dual language program as well. And we're also in a full support and implementation mode for our bond advisory committee, which is actually our next agenda item. So we can talk more about that as we make that transition.
Perfect. Any thoughts, comments, questions?
I just wonder if this, what we didn't put on the agenda was maybe an update about our day on the Hill. If, is it coming later? We're gonna do it Lidge? Okay.
Perfect. Next item is bond planning update.
Okay, so we're going to be joined here by Martin Turney and Tom Mullins. I want to share a couple comments that I did share about our vision about how facilities support learning in our district as they get set up with their presentation to both recap the last bond planning meeting, but also the first one, which was the kickoff, and preview the next one. But we really want to make sure that our facilities are these amazing spaces that support and empower and enhance teaching and learning for our students, for our staff, and create that sense of belonging that enables strong relationships to happen, which is the crux of teaching and learning. We want to make sure in support of that there's strong opportunity for innovation and choice. That includes more flexible programming and collaborative spaces as we look at our facilities. We want to make sure our facilities support all types of learning, diverse learning needs, as well as individuals who have specific ways that they want to best be able to engage in learning and teaching. There also might be specific requirements that come forward with different ways we need to program for the future. And so that might require specific, changes and intentional upgrades or complete overhauls or modifications to our spaces that might require supporting our skills development or even lab type classes. And then overall, we want to make sure that we are just flexible for any changes that come down the road for what we might need for programming and learning. We want to make sure our buildings are safe and secure, and we want to make sure that the design promotes both belonging, but also security as we have entry and exit points for all of our buildings. And finally, we want to make sure that our facilities are clean and green, which means that we have both sustainable and eco-friendly buildings, but also that we're using sustainable materials and products. And that keeps us in pace with our community needs, as well as considerations that are also required by state law. So that's just a bit about our vision of how we're hoping to accomplish our facilities work through the bond planning. And that's been shared with the bond planning committee. And I thought that would just open you up to talk more about what happened at the last meeting and go forward.
Thank you, Superintendent. Uh-oh, clicker not working for me. There we go. So purpose tonight, we will give you a brief update on the planning and also go over a recap of the initial bond advisory committee meeting and a very quick preview of our next meeting that's coming up next week on Tuesday. So I'll let Tom explain a little bit about where we are in our building assessments.
All of the sites, the physical visits by all the consultants and everyone and district representatives at the sites are complete. We're in the process now of taking all of that data, compiling it into spreadsheets, lists, estimating costs to it, and prioritizing all the different line items and projects. We've got the preliminary information. It's we're kind of going through it right now, again, helping with that prioritization. And we're trying to get as many staff members involved at this point to kind of help us with those prioritizations and get the complete reports are expected in mid to late February.
Okay, now going into our recap of the first meeting. This was a grounding meeting. It was kind of an introductory for people. And that was back on January 30th. Started out with an explanation of the charter. And pretty key to this is that the group understands, or the committee understands, that this is their opportunity to provide a proposal to the superintendent, and that's really what they're charged with. Later, the superintendent then crafts a recommendation to bring to you, the board of directors. Wanted to touch on, it's been a while since we've done a bond committee. So pointing out some of the things that shifted a little bit, and we're trying a slightly different approach than we've done in the past. So in terms of voting from how we did it in 2016, we're moving to more of a consensus type approach. Representation on the committee was done largely by school. Now we have folks who have multiple affiliations within the district, not just whatever location maybe their student belongs to or their feeder pattern. We had a mix of appointments and applications previously. This is more of an application process at large and appointed by principals. We've gone from a 5-meeting schedule. This is on 8-meeting schedule. So it gives us a little more time to dive in, particularly once we get those detailed building assessments and we are able to explain a little bit more about what we do in the vision for the district. Internal facilitation previously. This time we have some experienced external facilitators that are here to help us work through the process and provide their insight along the way as well. And then, of course, you know, in 2016, we're really focused on high growth and enrollment, and now we're shifting to more how we maintain excellent buildings and maybe bring on some additional things like the Green Building Act and those efficiencies. So getting into the content of the meeting itself. So like I said, this was a lot about laying foundation. So we start with things like what is a bond and what is a levy, because some folks just need to get introduced to the concept of what we're talking about and, you know, why those are different mechanisms. We also went over the outline of the timeline. So, you know, what's this going to look like in terms of the committee meetings and where does it lead to and the ultimate outcome. Spent a lot of time letting people introduce themselves, giving their why for being on the committee. So getting to share a little bit about themselves and what is important to them and why they're here on the committee. We also had 2 exercises that everyone participated in. One was to, you know, put dots on the places that they're affiliated with in the district so that we could get that image of where everyone's coming from, and we'll bring that back and display it at the next meeting so we can see we have a lot of coverage throughout the district and where people are coming from. And then also we had a questionnaire to, you know, let us learn a little bit more about their experience on if they've been on committees before and some of the other things that tell us just a little bit more about them. So then the superintendent touched a little bit about this. We had an opportunity to tell our story. So we gave some kind of informational starts there with the age of our facilities and the historical bond election results going back to even the 80s and what that looks like. And then, of course, we got to talk about what we believe about facilities, able to connect to and support powerful learning through innovation and choice, safe and secure buildings, and best practices for green and healthy schools. that wrapped up the meeting. We had some excellent time at the end to take some questions and make some connections with folks as well. So that was nice. The upcoming meeting next week, February 13th, we have this tentative outline. It's possible we could add one additional element at the last minute, but this is our tentative outline. Pretty neat to start out with a student voice panel. So get perceptions from students on our facilities and their thoughts. And then we have some presentations lined up, a connection to the strategic plan and some explanation about the district strategic plan, safety and security, and early learning. And as we go along with our additional meetings, up to the 8 meetings, we'll have a chance to hear from other programs and area experts from the district in those meetings. And so next steps, we will continue, as Tom said, to analyze the facility assessment data. We'll stay connected to the ongoing secondary innovation work, continue prep for all the upcoming bond advisory committee meetings. And then we want to point out that we are keeping a presence on the website for people to hop on there, take a look at the materials, eventually the minutes, any upcoming agendas, so they can stay in touch with what we're doing there. So that concludes the update. Yep.
Great. Questions?
I do have a question. Thank you for going through that. And I'm happy we're keeping this as a regular part of our conversation and how it's developing. And I want to see that representation map when you're done with it, just to see where all the dots went. The question I have is kind of a practical one. It's the slide that's about the evolution of the bond committee work, the from to slide.
Sure.
And it says we're going from voting to consensus. So I was just curious of what that looks like in real life with 60 plus people. That one, yeah.
Yeah. So in the past, it has been a strict, what's your vote? We have a threshold, and whatever topic we're on, if it's a portion of the proposal or not, then it would essentially pass or fail the committee, and it goes forward. And I think what our objective is here is to have a process more of kind of building into something, letting people have their voice along the way. And then it's not strictly a vote. It's more of as a group on the journey together, coming to an end and saying, okay, this is something rational that we can get behind and propose. Now, I understand there's probably some more concrete, how's it going to work questions that go along with that. And we are relying on our expert consultant to help us through that. So we will get into exactly how we're going to get there. I won't tell you I know exactly, 100%, but I'm confident that we will be able to do this as a group in a committee, and that this is an excellent way to go forward this time.
And I completely appreciate the spirit of it, right? Having the group build towards something, but at some point there's things that'll be in and out. So I'm just curious about how we get there. And you let me know along the way. We have many meetings.
You're so practical, Sydney.
I am very practical.
Other reflections and questions?
Well, I think for me, this is the most informative slide, you're right, of how things are different for the community. And I think it really is putting a community first look at things when you have an outside facilitator coming in. There's no sense that the district is driving the committee in a certain area and in a certain way. I think it really does feel like, to me, that the reflection is the work of the committee. And I think that's vitally important. I think saying it's not going to be in 5 meetings, we're taking 8 meetings to ensure there's good learning, good understanding, that you have time to reach a consensus as well. And I think all these things, I always see these people are going to be the ones really helping give direction, and therefore they're our best ambassadors moving forward. So I think that really this to me feels like there's more empowerment on this committee to really reach that consensus feeling rather than maybe pitting sectors against each other.
Which is really essential, because these are community assets. And I think that we really need to make sure that comes through and carries through to our whole community, so they know that we're not doing this because this is our vision. We're doing this because collectively we want to impact and transform lives across the 110 square miles. So thank you. Other thoughts? Yeah, Director Coy.
Again, I think this slide is very informative. I like the change too from representation by school to multiple affiliations. I think that's interesting too. It just brings in a broader set of our community. So, and like Director Mulling said, I'm interested to see what that map looks like. I think that's going to be really interesting. So thank you for the update. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone? No?
No, nothing for me other than I am eager to look at the historical bond results in the school facility timeline. But I take it that's on the district website. I understood that, right?
Yes, it's on one of the slides.
Okay, thank you.
I would request that when you go to the one of the last slides, the slides before, when you're saying like the bullet points of all the data that's coming, before that even, that you would send those facility assessment summaries to the board too, since like assume that we don't know anything about what the bond committee is, but like we may be like the community members will assume that we do. So if there are facility assessments, they're like, oh, we've already finished the clean building assessments for our respective high schools, and someone will come up and ask us, and we'll be like, so we don't want to have that as a response. So if you make sure that we are looped into all those, that would be really helpful. And then you probably want to, even though I know you'll be posting them under your materials, but you might want to add another place, like on a separate tab where it's like meetings, news, members, and whatever you want to call it. So you can also house it there. So people that don't want to try and sort through whichever meeting it was on where those critical materials are for the site assessments and all of those things, because we want to make this as easily accessible for everyone, and including board members.
It was a great group of folks, and while we do not have the distribution of everyone's affiliations and experiences so far, because we want to make sure we go back to them first so they see that before we post the official details. It was pretty incredible to see, folks that have been on multiple bond committees and dedicated to this district in volunteer ways over many decades, but also to see some completely new faces who want to contribute and be part of building. So this really is about us working with the community to empower and enhance this process in ways that are a little bit non-traditional from how districts and how we've done it in the past. So thank you to the team.
Thank you for the update. If there's any way you can video the student voice part of the meeting, that would be great. Probably for all sorts of reasons. Next time on our agenda is resolution number 1216, bond refunding.
Great. I just want to say a couple comments as we,
I was gonna say, I move the board adopt resolution number 1216, providing the issuance and sale of refunding bonds in the aggregate principal amount not to exceed $46 million, and delegated to the superintendent and/or chief of finance and operations of the district the authority to determine the structure of the bonds, approve the interest rates, maturity dates, and principal maturities for the bonds.
Second.
Superintendent.
thank you. Following proper order of things is an important thing in a board meeting. I just want to, as before Mariah Banasek starts to queue up this topic just for, your consideration and action, I just wanted to share that, since I've started in 2022 with a new team leading the finance and operations and business office, we've really focused heavily on this sort of aspect of how we really effectively steward our taxpayer dollars. And that's a really important value for me. I mean, having been a management consultant, going to, getting my MBA at MIT, like those are all the things that are instilled in you to be able to be an effective leader, and not just of public dollars, but of all resources that exist in a public entity. So I'm grateful to be able to work with two former state auditors who also share those values, and they're incredible, Mariah and Martin. But I wanted to say as a reminder, we have completed 2 bond refundings already. And that has saved taxpayers over the past, bit of time, $4.6 million approximately. And this next opportunity coming up is projected to save us about $5.4 million. So In sum, when the moment comes and if we're, the market is still favorable and we take action here with your support, our cumulative refunding is projected to exceed about $10 million. So I just want to say that because that's a big moment for us, and we take these dollars very seriously, and financial accountability is a core part of how we want to steward our work moving forward.
Thank you, Heather. Mariah Banasic, Executive Director of Finance and Budget. So tonight we have the resolution before you. And so this would give us parameters to move forward if the interest rates are favorable as we get closer to the bond sale date, which would occur in March. So we have Cynthia Weed with us tonight from K&L Gates, and she's here to discuss the bond resolution and also potential questions. Thank you.
Good evening. And again, for the record, my name is Cynthia Weed, and I'm a partner at K&L Gates. When I first started coming to Issaquah School District, the firm name was Preston Thorgrimson, which was some long time ago. So I've been working with this district for many years. And just to give you by way of introduction, this resolution is not part of the last planning for getting new money. This is only doing a refunding of outstanding bonds. And this hopefully will, as the superintendent said, hopefully will make this easier to demonstrate to the community that you're actually saving money for them. This refunding is only being done to accomplish savings to the taxpayers, no new money. There are no gimmicks associated with this refunding. In other words, we're not extending the maturity just to stretch out the debt service. It all has to stay within the original maturity schedule, and there have to be savings in every single year. And most importantly, those savings have to be net of all costs. You are not doing this just to work with lawyers and bankers. You are actually doing this to ultimately get savings to the taxpayers out in the community. So the resolution is what we have now deemed or determined to be the most efficient, which is a delegation resolution, meaning that we have a schedule. The banker has worked out a schedule about exactly when the right time is to go out to the market. But that time can change depending upon where the market is. And as you know, reading the newspaper and the financial news, the markets can change, and you may want to adjust it over time. And so the bankers feel that it's best if we have the opportunity to be flexible and get into the market quickly and not require you all to come down here for a special meeting at noon on that magical day when we actually set the interest rates. And so the delegation is to your superintendent and your chief of finance and operations. And so they have the opportunity to actually accept the final interest rates. And of course, you will get a report on how much has been saved finally through this refunding. Now, this delegation isn't totally wide open. In other words, there are parameters around the delegation. The first parameter is the time period. So we've got a good long stretch of time. Interest rates were, I'm not your banker. Interest rates have been going up and then maybe down some, but we don't expect a wide variation over the next few months. But the delegation does go out till December 31st, 2024. Do not expect it to take that long. And there's a target savings. That is the expectation, the minimum savings, which is fairly typical for a current refunding, which is this, just refunding and rolling over very quickly, is a minimum of 3%. But right now, we're well above that particular target and expect to stay above that target. So, and again, like I said, debt service savings have to happen every single year. Now, the resolution that you have before you is a fairly long resolution, and I can see some of you might be just thinking, oh, this is a lawyer. Is she going to talk to me about this resolution page by page by page? And I want to assure you that the resolution, 90% of the resolution is actually relatively boilerplate. We have to comply with state law, we have to comply with federal tax law, and we have to comply with federal securities laws. So 90% of this document has to do with administrative tasks to make sure we comply with all of these laws. It's fundamentally pretty basic as a resolution. You're borrowing money and you promise to pay it back. And that's ultimately what the goal is in the resolution. Although as lawyers, it is double spaced, but we managed to accomplish that in a number of pages. And I can assure you that you might know, as like most lawyers, I love talking about bonds and talking about resolutions far more than you enjoy hearing me talk about bonds and resolutions. But I would always welcome any particular questions that you have. No question is too frivolous as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight and for outlining it really clearly to us and our stakeholders why this is an important thing. So with that, I wanted to first open up to any public input. So anyone in the room or on Zoom have any public input on this resolution 1216 in front of us? Want to open up the board for any questions for our team? I know we just did this like a couple months ago. So, okay. Well, you were so thorough and explained everything. So thank you.
And maybe it is important to note that this is a two-part conversation. So we did go through a first explanation and learning in our last board meeting, and then we complete it tonight as well, in case anyone would like to go back and hear additional information about it.
Thank you. Well, motion in front of us is for resolution 1216. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There you go. The next item is monitoring report, governance policy ends to academics and foundations.
I move the board accept the monitoring report for ends to academic and foundations as presented.
Second.
Great. As Dr. Dana Bailey and Rich Melish make their way up to the podium, I wanted to just set the stage that the board has engaged in 2 work studies to discuss ends to, which is academics and foundations. So we sometimes always use coding to talk and refer to things, but academics and foundations is really important to state out loud because it means that upon graduation, students will be academically prepared and confident to pursue higher education or specialized career training. We've taken the charge from the board over the past year and a half to continue to make our reports more concise. There is just so much work to talk about that we could probably write 100 or more pages or a whole book. But we are taking the charge seriously to condense and be more succinct, but also focus on the most important measures from a big picture point of view, and then determine how we are progress monitoring and looking at other data points and details along the way that are salient and important in support of those big picture milestones. So I'm probably mixing up a lot of our language, but it's about how we reach our goals for our students and make sure that our students are successful in life. So with that, I'll pass it over to the students to go first, actually, with a report. And we've done some teaming to gather some information to set the stage for current state right now. So as a reminder, we review our reports in 1 year in arrears, essentially. So it's helpful to start with what the current state is, so we can just hear that in the context of the conversation. And we're going to go with Gibson Eck first. And we're going to go in alphabetical order by the first name of your school. Okay. So I can remember that as well.
You guys come up if you would introduce your name and school, that'd be great.
Hello, my name is Leilani Matthew Issaquah, and I'm from Gibson Eck High School.
I'm Hava Alcorn, and I'm also from Gibson Eck High School.
And so this is kind of like a synthesis of the data that we collected. So basically, students at Gibson Eck High School communicated that internships are a key highlight, and they provide students with valuable experiences and a competitive edge. Soft skill development and a space for experimentation are what many students say are crucial to have in a school space. A call for more options in math and language program access are noted to be recurring themes throughout the interviews. Many students would like to have more communication about the accessibility of district online courses.
Additionally, students credit the internship program and the guidance of advisors for building networks and preparing them for post-high school pursuits. Graduated students highlighted practical skills gained at Gibson Neck, including effective time management and confident interaction with professional adults and academic content. This feedback suggests that Gibson Neck equips students with clear direction and the confidence to navigate future academic and professional challenges.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Issaquah?
Hello, my name is Siddharth Basri.
And I'm Naomi Wu. We're both from Issaquah High School.
And here's our end two report. So we've conducted many interviews of 16 students in our school, and we have noticed that overall, we feel that the district is doing many things right in regards to education. In particular, many students are happy with the course offering. I think 3/4 of them said that they really enjoyed the great variety of classes and that there are classes available for them, which will prepare them for any potential careers and futures that they would have. In terms of being prepared for classes, they said that the teaching style is very important, and that students who have teachers who are willing to who are willing to ease students in to classes, especially AP and honors classes. They are really they feel more comfortable in those classes. And then in terms of difficulty, the most difficult classes for students to adopt to were science and math classes, and that especially for science classes, this might be due to a low overlap in course content. Keep in mind though that this is a small minority of the students, and the majority of students are pretty happy with how well they're prepared. Kids have also noted that there is a lot of overlap in many of the classes, especially in language classes like Spanish and math classes. And in particular, they point to Algebra 2 to Pre-Calc, those two classes having a lot of overlap. But they've said that it appears that students really enjoy or appreciate that overlap because it helps them review and get their mind in that headspace to help them learn higher level content. And students would also like a greater focus of many of the concepts they learn and how they can be applied in the real world.
Okay, some points that I wanted to bring up were that when I interviewed some of the students, a lot of them mentioned that they felt, like Siddharth mentioned, that there was a good variety of classes. But for selecting new classes for the next year, I noticed that some of the students mentioned that they felt a bit unsure when moving forward to new classes, especially for electives. We have about a week or two of course selection guides and just people coming in to talk to students about the next year's classes. However, some of my students that I talked to mentioned that some of the course guides are very broad and not very descriptive at all. And when they moved on to those classes in the next year, they found that the structure of those classes was very different than what they were expecting and what was described to them. So then they felt they were underprepared, or they felt that the class wasn't suited for them, and it was difficult to get out of that into a more suitable class for them.
Thank you. Liberty.
Hi, I'm Mia Williamson. And I'm Aditi Marihali. We're both from Liberty High School. Some of the things that we noticed when conducting interviews in our homerooms with groups of students were relating to what Naomi was talking about with course guides, that students feel like there's a limited amount of courses that offer training for specialized careers, but there are some classes like Future Ready that prepare them for the future in terms of like financial life skills. But students have felt that scheduling conflicts, which includes a limited number of these classes being offered, or these classes occurring at the same time as other electives or required classes, prevent them from taking these opportunities. And other than that, they felt like the progress of their sequential classes, like in math or science or history, those kind of core classes, have been good with overlapping enough to give review from the previous year without being too redundant.
And I'd just like to add on to that. Some students said that they would like to see more specialized classes, especially for the STEM subjects. So things like AP Physics would be great. But overall, most students said that they generally found that the classes that we offer do support their career goals. So yeah.
Thank you. Skyline.
Hello, my name's Nishita and I'm from Skyline High School. To conduct our research on ENDS 2, we had interviews with groups of 10 juniors and seniors in their history classes. And some of the key points that we found out were that most students really appreciate how the difficulty of their classes increases as they take like the second parts of those classes, and they think it helps them build that knowledge and also adapt to the increasing difficulty, so it's more manageable for them. And then another thing is they really enjoyed being able to take those advanced classes, especially IB courses. They think those really helped with their preparations in future careers, and they really appreciated the IB career program, which had really specific classes to their career pathway, and they thought it was really cool. And they expressed being able to really feel the connection to the application of those courses in those careers. And then they also really appreciated the overlap between STEM classes, such as math, as noticed in the Issaquah and Liberty reviews as well. And they said that there was a little bit less of that overlap in science classes, just because the course material for like physics and chemistry isn't as related, but they still appreciated a little bit of the connect that was in between environmental science and biology, for example. And then one thing they did point out is, even though that there are some courses such as Future Ready to help them prepare for life skills, they'd like more of those. And they also mentioned that Zello, though is helpful as a concept, the actual application of it isn't as successfully implemented. They appreciated how in 11th grade you can build a resume in Zello, but in freshman year, sophomore year, and senior year, they thought it was a little bit less valuable. But overall, I think the district's doing a great job, and those were my key findings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. We'll have Dr. Bailey and Rich Melish join us at the podium to set up the board for discussion, and we'll do some brief framing points.
Dana Bailey, Chief Academic and Student Success Officer.
And Rich Melish, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning Services. Tonight, we're here to introduce ENDS 2, Academics and Foundations. And before we jump into the meat of the introduction, we did receive, too late for me to put in the written report, a suggested clarification on ENDS 2.5, page 13, where it talks about the fine arts graduation requirement. Just wanted to really clarify, and we can amend this into the report if it is your will, that 1.0 of the art requirement may be substituted with a personal pathway credit. That's how we state it in our course guides, and we can add that statement for clarification. Okay, I'm going to jump on in. ENDS 2. Oh, the stories we could tell. Okay. So we did want to present kind of a mix of the qualitative and quantitative outcomes, because as students reach graduation, we're hoping that they're completing coursework that's well designed to prepare them in key content areas for what they will face beyond high school. There are two kind of big and recurring ideas or themes in our findings. The first is that Issaquah School District continues to be a really high-performing school district where so many of our students achieve at very high levels, and they exit our district with a depth and breadth of learning and future educational opportunities. We have very high graduation rates. 95.3% of our seniors graduated in 4 years in 2023, which was higher than our kind of pre-COVID era graduation rates and highest among our peer districts. I also like looking at the fact that 97.8% of seniors from the class of 2022 graduated in 4 or 5 years. I think that persistence of our students is admirable. And then when we look at our students who by design stay in our system to a later age, that number goes up over time. We also see that same high level and comparisons to other districts continue to be echoed in other aspects of our data, including a reintroduction of growth data, which allows us to compare like groups and kind of look at our impact size that we have. We had a 12% more students in our district grow at high rates on that measure than the state average. And across every demographic group, we scored very high in our growth in comparison to the state like groups. The other big theme, though, is that we acknowledge that we are not done and we are not satisfied with all the results because there is persistent inequitable outcomes in our district with students in our BIPOC focus groups and students with disabilities not experiencing the level of successful outcomes that we want for all of our students. The 4-year graduation rate, gap in graduation rate may have decreased somewhat from 2019, but it was still 7 to 11% for various demographic groups in the 4-year graduation rate. There were also significant opportunity gaps represented in the data around Algebra 1 and 3rd grade reading. The district leadership team, our school leaders, and staff throughout our district recognize the need to work towards different results. And to do that, we're going to have to do things differently. So there are 3 ways that are recurring in this report about how we want to do things differently and how we are initiating doing things differently to get to different results. The first is the way that we are working to operationalize inclusive and culturally responsive practices through Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. UDL is based on brain science and educational research and provides a framework for teaching strategies that have proven to increase learning. ISD is systematically realigning resources and training to focus on UDL implementation with our students furthest from educational justice at the center of our planning. The second systemic action highlighted in the report is the continued development of multi-tiered systems of support. When we say integrated multi-tiered systems of support, the research on MTSS goes back for decades and is very clear. And the work that we're doing around MTS is starting to really redefine our work, change systems such as assessment or interventions or student supports, and the way that we make curriculum decisions. The third theme that I see woven throughout this report is the way that our teams work. We have added teams, we have strategic teams, we have new tiered teams. We have teams mentioned throughout the report that operate in a very different way. They look at data differently. They reach out to engage differently, and they're coming up with different strategic focus to try to change the work that we're doing in our district. I would like to take one moment to dive a little bit deeper into an example of that teamwork that also folds in the UDL and the multi-tiered systems of support. As we resume adopting new curriculum, we are using a very different procedure and a very different method for adopting curriculum. It is no longer simply replacing the textbook of a course, but it is re-examining the impact it is having on disproportionality. It is dreaming big. We had Dr. Adeyemi Stembridge present a dream protocol to our district in the October non-student day, and we use that with every adoption team to dream big for our courses and to dream differently and to dream with those students who have had the biggest opportunity gaps at the center of our dreaming. We are developing an equity framework. You heard about that in our strategic plan update. We are not just looking at professional practices, but we're delving deeply with adoption teams around what does MTS look like in this course? What does universal design look like in this course? And how can we make sure that that's woven into the fabric of the course? We are changing the way we do engagement. We are no longer waiting until the final decision has already been made to invite the community to give us input. The input period is now the entire field testing when we have finalists, more than one finalist material we're considering, and inviting parents in multiple ways to give us input into what they see as the strengths of the potential curriculum that we are reviewing. And then we really circle back at the end of that and say, when we finished making all the decisions, we adopted curriculum, did we create a scope and sequence that truly infuses MTSS and truly infuses UDL? This work is beginning to show different decisions being made around curriculum, and I'm excited to see a way that it's operationalizing some of the ideas that we've been talking about for years. All right, well, it's hard to stay at the 20,000 or 30,000 foot level with ends too, because there's so much blood, sweat, and tears that go into making this work real at every level in our district every day. There's so much behind almost every statement in this report, and I look forward to the conversation. Dr. Bailey and myself are here to provide any clarification or assistance in your conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Wanted to open up to any public input at this time. Is there anyone in the room or on Zoom that has any public input on ends two? Seeing none. I do want to mention what Dr. Mullins has already alluded to, that we've had 3 hours of work study conversation about ends two prior to this moment. And so for those of you watching at home, you may not hear as much dialogue for what is such an in-depth report, because we've spent so much time already. And I thank you for that time and what your team has done way ahead of time to prepare so we could have those meaningful conversations. That being said, I wanted to open it up for any wonderings or reflections now that we have the final product in front of us. If anyone has anything that they wanted to lead off with, Director Mullins.
I do have one. So first, it's just an acknowledgement of I appreciate so much as a person who struggles with the monitoring and arrears concept, getting to do both, getting to look at the data in arrears, but also understand what's happening in the now. It satisfies that bit of me of like, what are we going to do? So I do appreciate that. In the report itself, I felt maybe it's even just the layout of it to be more satisfying, like clarity of not just what the interpretation is, but the definitions that are called out. Like when we're referring to what's in the data sets, I think that's really helpful just to make sure from a language perspective, we all understand that we're talking about the same things. The milestones that matter is something that matters deeply to me, right? There's lots of things that we know and can measure, but getting down to those chief milestones that we know we need to make a difference on, and then tuning our programming and our approach to make sure that we can make a difference at those milestones, I personally think is the winning formula. So I love to see that coming together in the report. And so on that point, I think the thing I was maybe my question is about is when we look at the milestones, and I'm between page 1, I'm just at the end of page 1, beginning of page 2 of the report, I was wondering, we've been talking about 3 major milestones. We've been talking about the 3rd grade reading, the algebra 1, and the 9th grade on track. And so I guess my wondering was about its absence, the 9th grade on track's absence in this report.
Yes, and probably all the more question because we included it in the data workbook as a milestone. So I do understand the question. It is something we talked quite a bit about. I think we really focused on 3 things about inclusion of data. First of all, grain size. Are we keeping at that high level milestone level? This is something that we wrestled with. Another one was there are multiple reports. Where does the data best fit? Like which report does this data best match with? And then the third criteria we talked a lot about is what data most reflects the actual words and the ends themselves. And so though I could easily make the case to include ninth grade on track for graduation or ninth grade success in as a milestone in this, we do feel like it was the right grain size. We did know that it will be a highlight of ends one monitoring because it is a key milestone in our strategic plan. So we knew that we would cover it in depth there. And I personally really wrestled with, did it add to the dialogue beyond the actual graduation rate, which is not necessarily in some of the other reports. So that was kind of the decision-making process. It is very valuable to us, and it is certainly a key milestone for us.
Thank you.
If you go to page 16, the bottom of page 16, please. I appreciate this addition this year. This is something that I had not seen before, where you have under, well, I'll just say I agree with Director Mullins. The formatting of this is just really easy to digest. But I like the addition of this box where under each sort of academic discipline, you highlight what you guys have chosen as important things for us to train our eyes on as far as grades, and then give us the disproportionality of them. I think that's really helpful. I think you go to the bottom of page 17. I think what's really exciting is I like that you, again, try and balance that sort of what is last year versus what is this year. And the fact that the efforts we made, or the intentionality to change the middle school pathway for math, is yielding immediate benefit in addressing the disproportionality of enrollment. And I know then you have to do all the hard work of supporting to make sure that we have the same outcomes.
Yes.
But I think that's really, really powerful to say, we expect all students to do this, and lo and behold, they're doing it. And so I think that that's really exciting. So I appreciate that you're bridging between the year in arrears and yet still letting us sort of get previews of what it is. In the way that she talks about ninth grade on track. Last year I had Algebra 2, and I would love, I think, in the future for that to be part of the other data week, is called the additional data set, because we spent so much time a year ago talking about and dissecting Algebra 2, because that's that is the final endpoint in Washington State for must have to graduate. And so I do think that even though it's not one of those moments here, but because it goes Algebra 1, then geometry, and then Algebra 2, and because we know and hear so much about Algebra 2 across our district, that I don't want to lose track of that. So the amount of depth and dissection that we did of that, I would love for that to live in the additional data for future, because I think that was a really important framework and discussion, and something that we see as a potential stumbling block that will, I think, be meaningful when we talk about ends one and what are the classes that our students struggle with as they get to graduation. That's something I just don't want to lose sight of. And so I don't care where it lives, but it seems like it would be ideally to live here based on where it was last year.
Thank you.
Mr. Taylor.
This is the first time I've seen one of these reports, and it looked great to me. So I have nothing to compare it against. But I will say it's clear that there's a lot of great work going on in the district. And that's great that work's going on. I think I wanted to point out in the report that I did really appreciate the honesty in recognizing the shortcomings and equitable outcomes. And it's clear the disproportionality is persisting with our graduation rates and testing. And of course, the first part of fixing a problem is acknowledging the problem. And I know that the problem has existed long before me coming onto the board. But I just really did appreciate that you were very upfront about, we recognize this is a very major issue that we need to address. And I'm just very hopeful that these mitigating programs that you're trying to put into place will improve the situation. This is something I'll be looking at very closely moving forward. So that's my main takeaway.
Thank you. Ready. Dr. Morado.
Yeah, one of the things is throughout the report, you have the student growth percentiles. And I think that as somebody who's been doing this with you, I've been on the board for this my 15th year. I may have an understanding of what that is, but because this is a public facing document, I'm wondering if there's area to go into a little bit of detail as what does that number mean? What's a good number? What's a bad number? Is it good that there's, 62% median SGP in the area of math amongst all students versus the 51 for students with disability? Like when am I looking for so that the numbers have context and meaning behind them?
And I'm assuming you're saying get that in writing somewhere here, an explanation, not that you want me to explain something now.
Right.
Okay. Just want to make sure what the request is.
I have a question. In the early parts, page 1 or 2 of the report, where you talk about like sort of the interventional pieces, and as you guys try and align data sets to certain ends, which I love, so it's not just redundancy throughout. Where is WaKids going to live? That's one of our earliest moments to identify and intervene. And I talk about WaKids too much, but it tells us the students that we absolutely can intervene on early. And so I'm not saying it necessarily belongs in E2, but I think it does need to belong somewhere, because I really want to know transparently, what are we doing to intervene with students, and are those interventions working? Which is the most important part for me. Because if they're not working, then I'm like, well, let's do something different. But I just haven't yet seen where that lives, and how do we actually track and monitor that. And we're only talking in like 40 students, but those are 4 students that then 12 years later may be challenged if we don't track and focus on their interventions early.
Yeah, I do wonder if, since the ends focuses on outcomes, it's hard to find a place for the thing we do when they first come in the system, right? So I'm wondering if what I hear you saying is that somewhere in our executive limitations, where we describe our actions, the adult actions, we speak to how we use WaKids process and information. I'll have to think about where that belongs with my colleagues.
Yeah, I just think because we continue to only get kind of very basic, like, here's the results of it, where I really want to know at this point. So here's how we've identified students, and this is what we're doing.
Yeah. Okay. Understood. Thank you.
Dr. Mullins.
It's just such an important point, right? And we're so close. I feel like we're like right on the edge of it, because knowing what these key milestones are, and then backing up to where we can interrupt those milestones, and how we can know as a system that we're prepared to do that, and that's not ad hoc action. So to your point about the WaKids data, if we already know that there's a certain subset of our students who have some challenge points, what is our pre-prepared actions that are taken versus maybe the burden of individual teacher, classroom, school building to figure out what that is, and how do we raise the visibility to what those things are. And I know, maybe it's how I feel. Sometimes we feel like we wrap it on a thing called MTSS, like it kind of gets in this. And that's probably a fair comment, but I think, again, I'll say that for me, it's always about that sense of urgency. And if we have this early spark, there's no downside to maybe over helping and then being proven that an individual kiddo doesn't need that help. And I think sometimes it's more of a retroactive, oh, okay, well, they really needed the help later. Like, we've now confirmed that they'll need help, so we can give it. And so I think there's something in the sense of urgency of whether it's WaKids data or new entrant to school system or some of these other inflection points, where if we had, we were more transparent in the assets or the approach that we deploy, even if that means some kiddos get help and you realize, okay, they didn't need that. It just would feel that sense of urgency versus waiting to be proven that they needed to get the help, if I'm saying that right.
Yeah, and I think just building on that, I think maybe we just needed somewhere to carve out our early learning data set, because your 3 and 4-year-olds with our intervention programs that we have TS Gold data, which TS Gold is DWA kids. And so I've still asked this and haven't heard, like, do the interventions that we do in ECE, do they actually impact and change the trajectory of our children? And we have decade of data now from TS Gold. So I would love to know actually, what is it actually doing? Because somehow maybe we need to figure this, and maybe this is a board conversation on where would an early learning data set best fit. But I would so love to hear from you and your team on where you think that was. But I think we should probably, maybe that's part of the problem, is it feels very piecemeal, or then we're just kind of admiring the problem sometimes rather than being able to holistically look at it and say, okay, see, these are the students that get identified by Child Find, when they're 1, 2, 3. These are the things we're doing for them as a system, starting at 3, 4, 5. And here's the data that we're tracking to make sure that our interventions are working.
Yes, I hear the interest, certainly early identification and early intervention, as well as later ages, rapid onboarding are key MTSS strategies that we are making strides in. I'm not going to say we're perfect in yet, but we are making strides in, and I'm hearing the interest in some way, shape, or form, hearing more detail on our progress on building those systems more specifically.
And I guess just maybe for me to bring it back to why I think this is a board imperative is because if what potentially is needed to do some of these early interventions is a reallocation or resourcing in a different way, or something that's more programmatic, that's the surface point, because that's where we want to put the bets, right? To say, okay, we want to over pivot in some of these spaces. And so what I just wouldn't want is maybe a suffering in silence. Like, if only we could do this thing, it would make a difference. And so it's definitely not a critique of what's in play. It's just wanting to confirm that if there's something that could or should be done to resource differently, that is surfaced and not a lingering barrier.
Still have to remember how to use my technology up here. Can you give me a little more explanation on rapid onboarding? Again, I'll say this is a foundational question, I guess.
Yeah, it's come up in conversations, in past conversations with the board. So I wanted to really make sure that we highlight that is something that some of our new formative assessments are allowing us to do, is when a student comes new to us, they may not have had the same educational experience as our students who have been in our system. So it's super important that we quickly identify if they have any learning gaps or needs, and that we quickly identify the right intervention that matches their educational need. So not waiting until the next date that happens to be an iReady date or something like that, but really saying, how do we quickly identify their learning needs, quickly get them in the right programs that we have that match their needs. And so that's what I mean by rapid onboarding.
That's helpful. What's the average time period, would you say, for that? Or is that hard to pinpoint?
I don't know that I could speak to that with data backing me up. We've been talking with our elementary teams that have been doing this the longest about what a reasonable time frame is. And sometimes we have students who come to us with a lot of educational records, and it's really clear that they don't have any educational needs, outstanding educational needs. And so we're not necessarily jumping straight to assessments with those, but where we don't know, we're asking our schools, can we get there in the first couple weeks, first 3 weeks, get them? I mean, you don't want to have your first day at school be take an iReady test, but maybe not even your second day. But it is something that we want to say, once they get comfortable, can we do an assessment? And it may not even be iReady. It might be one of our other one-on-one assessments that we do that actually give us some qualitative data along the way as well. So we're working with schools to try to set that expectation, and yes, so.
No, that's helpful. Just one other quick question. Would you say, so students maybe who are newer to the American school system, what does that rapid onboarding look like?
Oh,
I guess curious on that too.
Well, by legislation, they have, is it 3 or 6 weeks? I'm suddenly forgetting. We have to do a language assessment for any student whose home language is other than English. I believe it's 3 weeks. I believe it's 3 weeks to do that assessment. We do not miss that deadline because it dictates funding for our programs as well. So we want to make sure we have those services for them.
That's great. Thank you.
I will say, just again, since we have talked about this in detail and not really tonight, there is so much to celebrate in this report.
Yeah.
The fact that I wish you could broadcast the elementary reading scores. Like, they look just like they did before COVID and even better. And so hats off to you and your team and all the hard work that is happening in our buildings. And yet the honesty there to say, hey, that's great. Middle school math, less great. And work to do. And we're going to see that continue through in high school. And it's going to be much more challenging to our system to be able to make sure that they can still hit those Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and higher level science class success that we want for our students. But there's some really great stuff in here. And so thank you for all the work that those things that didn't just happen.
Thank you.
I would say we took it to heart when you shared last year that this report was important to us in its 100-page form, because we would like to talk about all the data all the time. And we are striving to narrow to those very key milestones. And we work here every day if you want to talk about more data.
I think we talk about it in this room a lot, probably more than probably most any school district in the state. And it's probably why our scores reflect that. So thank you. If there's no further questions there is.
Just amongst that, I wanted to highlight one that I thought was really important when looking, because I think there has been a shift in something that I've talked about for a long, long time, is I felt like when we were inviting students to do self-select in higher math, especially in middle school, what I thought was really important, it's on page 18 at the top, where it looks at enrollment into trying advanced math path. In 2022, 31% of our students in the BIPOC focus group met standard, but only 22 selected to try an advanced math pathway. But in 2023, 36% of students in the BIPOC focus group met standard, and 37% chose an advanced math pathway. That is a huge jump for me. That is probably something I have been looking for specifically in this district in the 14 years that I've sat on this board, is how do we ensure that students, especially students in the BIPOC community, understand what it is they can be taking, that we are not creating a wall by the way we provide the opportunity. And so what it shows to me is that whatever is different has made a big difference. That is exactly the kind of scoring that we're looking for. And I just wanted to say that after 14 years, I feel like that is a huge achievement that I've been waiting for. And so I didn't want to end tonight without highlighting that.
Thanks. That would be directly linked to the middle school leadership in the direct reach out to individual kids and families.
Any other thoughts or comments? Well, we have a motion in front of us for ends 2. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There you go. Thank you. Thank you for all the time and preparation for our 3 hours worth of work study, for all that you've done to make this a really readable and meaningful document. I know I can't imagine the hundreds of hours of work that goes into this.
Thank you. Yes, many hands, many conversations. So thank you to the team for ensuring that this was a productive conversation.
Okay. The next item is monitoring report, executive limitation 10, structure of schools. I'll start with motion.
I move the board accept the monitoring report for executive limitation 10 structure of schools as presented.
Second.
Superintendent.
Great. So I wanted to provide some context that this executive limitation has typically been on the consent agenda in years past, but we did discuss it last year as part of our overall review of interpretations and efforts to streamline reporting and to make sense of what data and evidence was being provided in that reporting. So we did want to bring it forward this year for discussion as we continue to welcome new board members and sort of continue to make sense of this, as well as highlight some of the potentially key changes that did happen. There were a few in the year that this was monitoring for. So just to highlight, the one big change I do want to highlight is that there was a 7th period day implementation for the 22-23 school year. And then there was lots of discussion last year around how are we using time to support social and emotional learning. We heard from students last year in particular, and there were some changes that are now implemented this year, but I think that was a programmatic set of conversations that might have led to maybe adding more details here, but eager to hear what the board might say around whether or not those programmatic additions should live elsewhere versus here in structure, although it's natural to talk about the connection of program to structure as well. We added some additional details on, guidelines and protocols for how we handle absences across our system, and some other minor details were just updated for this year. So I welcome Dr. Bailey, and has already been at the podium, and also Donna Hood. So turn it over to you.
Sure. Donna Hood, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources.
Thank you. As we bring forward structure of schools for discussion tonight, and in thinking specifically about the elements that are in our sphere of influence and the opportunities to maximize instructional time, we are aware of and attentive to district systems that support this shared goal. The monitoring report brings forward how we think about mandatory and desired professional development, what we can and should do outside of the student day, and how our systems and processes can protect our students' learning experiences. To this end, we consider where we have authority over staff absences and put systems in place to achieve the shared goal as much as possible. I believe this system adheres to leave requests as mandated by state law and our contract, and engage appropriately in cases of unpaid leave, leave abuse, negotiated blackout, and personal leave days. In structures and agreements around homeroom and flex time allow for school business and SEL lessons and academic support to be built into the school day so as to protect the learning time in individual classes or class periods or subjects, and placing school business activities such as the Right Now course request process in homeroom or flex time allows for business as usual in all of the other classes that students attend. The ISD calendars are set for the next 2 school years, and the parent and staff input was varied. What is not varied is the 180-day school day requirement, and our competing interests shared through the survey work and conversations start the starting after or before Labor Day, having 2 full weeks with 3 weekends at first winter break, maintaining a second winter break, a full week at spring break, and concluding the school year before Juneteenth. All of these cannot be true and have 180 school days. Having the calendars in the future allows students and families to plan for vacations on or around school breaks. And as Superintendent Tagiak mentioned, the transition of Liberty High School to a 7-period day occurred last year. But specific to what I wanted to share is it included the opportunity to add a scheduled flex time for Liberty. Did you want to shout out to people who wanted to? Okay. We appreciate your conversation.
Didn't want to step in. Okay, is there any public input in the room or on Zoom? Okay, seeing none. Want to make sure and give our students an opportunity first crack. I know you guys all presented, and we appreciate your voice in E2. If you have anything that you wanted to lead off the discussion on EL 10. I know ELs are less exciting to you than ends, and I get that because this is really about adults. The end is about you guys. But if not, sorry, Yumi, sorry.
I will add, I do want to say that for Issaquah High School, I know that last year we had a nest time instead of a flex time. They're basically the same thing, except that this year we have only one flex time per week. And we've replaced the 2 from last year. So we have 1 flex time this year, and now we have 1 flex time and 1 homeroom. I know that some students have some complaints about this, largely because in homeroom, most of the things that we do are SEL lessons, which many students are not very appreciative of, even if they are very beneficial to our emotional health and also just learning about how the school functions. I will say that many students are very appreciative of flex times because they give us an opportunity to get help from our teachers to make up tests, to figure out some scheduling conflicts with missing days of school and having to make up tests and quizzes and projects and stuff like that. I find it very helpful. One very, very small complaint. I don't know if the board is the one in charge of this or maybe the individual schools. I know about the transition from this last year to this year. Many students find it difficult to say the word flex time rather than nest time because we are Issaquah Eagles. But that's a very minor complaint. And I do think it's very helpful to have these during our week.
Thank you for that input. Definitely not board input into the name of that time in the day.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't see what source of me.
Coming from Liberty, where we had to shift from 8 periods down to 7 periods, I definitely still experience a lot of complaining on students and some teachers' part on that shift. I think students really miss having that extra period. They liked being able to take an extra elective, to take an extra class, to really get into the subjects that they wanted to. And while aligning with the other high schools is important, and then some of the other reasoning for moving to a 7-period day was making sure you see your teachers more than 2 or 3 times a week. I've heard teachers say that they found that they have less time to do their curriculum, and Aditi's nodding because we heard our math teacher talk about this on like Tuesday. That having those shorter class periods as opposed to the longer ones create so much more transition time just with the starting and ending a class that it shaves off so much time that our teacher said in the past, she's always gone over every single math homework assignment in question, and now we don't do it at all. And I feel like we're rushing through classes. I've heard from the music departments, especially from band and orchestra, they take the time to set up their instruments to tune, and having to do that in extra time with having 2 50-minute periods instead of 1 90-minute period really does take away from their rehearsal time. So.
Thank you. Siddharth?
I just wanted to voice an opinion about some of the about nest time, in flex time. Yeah, so I felt that I didn't like a lot of the teachers are taking a more harsher stance on like not allowing us to leave our next classes to go to somewhere else. And this is I do not know whether the majority of students share this opinion, but I feel that some students might need help from 2 classes at once, and especially considering that there is only 1 nest time right now. I mean, flex time. Naomi was right about that. Very right. Yeah. Considering that there's only 1 flex time now, that might really be harmful to students who might need help for 2 classes.
That's great feedback for our superintendent and her team. Yes.
I just like to add on to what Mia said. I think she summed it up pretty well. But I will say that there are quite a few advantages of our 7-period system. The obvious one being flex time. Also the fact that students are just able to get up more often, and that's just good for walking around and, maintaining, I guess, just general health there. But yeah, I will say that the 8-period schedule did allow us more flexibility in terms of our classes. I think it also allowed us to have a better connection with our teachers since we spent effectively more time with them actually like learning rather than time just counted in minutes. And so I think there's pros and cons to each, but Liberty's still kind of adjusting to that. So yeah.
Thank you for that. That's really helpful for us to hear because we don't hear that and wouldn't hear any other way. So we appreciate that. And we want to know as it continues to go through the year, how you guys and your colleagues reflect on it by year's end. So want to open up to the board to join in, jump in on, and students can also continue. Sydney can help me monitor. I'm not paying attention. Maybe no one. Maybe there was no more board comment. Our students summed it up so well. Like there's nothing else that we need to say. Director Morales.
I was going to say, and I shared this with the superintendent, that historically we did have more actual data related to the number of teachers that were out, so that we'd have a better understanding of what does it look like for the normal day. And in the past, it was, I think, 3 days chosen kind of at random through the year, but then it's the same days every year that we were given data to be able to just reflect, because it's one of those things where how are we monitoring just what the impact is if we don't, as a board, don't have data? And so I feel like that's what's missing. You can give me data regarding what the policy is, but if I don't know what is actually happening, it's hard for me to be able to judge over time. Has there been a shift? Is there, was there during an implementation of a curriculum, if we have too many curriculums coming at the same time, we've got too many teachers out during class time. So some of that data just feels missing to me. Either we know that we're going to have a higher level because here's a number of adoptions we're doing, or whether or not any of those are being done. What kind of things are taking teachers out and how many, and is it changing year to year? So how does that impact the system?
Yeah, and for the second point, I was curious why the data that was provided in the Friday update wasn't linked to or referred to in this report, because it was specifically about our calendar and our change, and you'll see it in some of them, the absence rate went up quite a bit from what was the day before Thanksgiving when it was a Wednesday versus the day before Thanksgiving break, which is now a Tuesday, and absences did go up significantly. So that was one of the questions we were wondering whenever it was that we ultimately adopted those calendars. So I was curious why that was chosen not to be part of this report.
You let me know. Nope.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We'll answer before we get to a question.
Okay. So I'd first like to start by answering Director Moraldo's question. So one of the measures that I find is really common across human resources departments in the state of Washington is really about fill rate. And that's how well we're able to cover teacher absences. Human resources departments can't necessarily constrict how many folks are accessing sick leave on any given day, for example. We can manage our personal leave, which we do. There are caps to that on certain days. We stop at about 25 people from a classroom absence for personal leave. So that's a cap, and we can monitor that. With regard to sick leave, though, that's a much more volatile up and down number as viruses and things affect all of us. So we've been monitoring that fill rate really, really closely. And last year we started at about an 84% fill rate and ended the year at 89%, which we felt was pretty strong. And we compared ourselves to other districts, did some research on that, really set about attempting to hire more and more qualified cert subs. But of course, our subs also get sick, and they are subs because they want to choose when they work. So it's a tricky thing. You don't know, there's no magic number of subs that will make sure that you have enough. So we were really monitoring. I'm happy to report this fall, we've already hit a 95% fill rate. So we have dramatically increased our fill rate, and we're super, super pleased. I think it's not been one thing, it's been many things, and including the efforts of our sub dispatcher and coordinator, but also our classroom teachers help us every day. With that 5% remaining, they step up and fill in for colleagues and offer when they can to cover a class on their prep period. And so that's very, very helpful to the system overall. But the 95% fill rate is helping everyone, I think, feel a little bit less impacted too. Yeah.
But I think the reason for the measurement is really about how it impacts student learning. When a substitute is in a class over so many periods, there is learning loss, and especially our students going to school on a day, and out of their 6 or 7 teachers, two of them or three of them are absent, and how does that impact learning for the student? So I think that's why the measurement for me is so that I understand how does it impact student learning when their normal teacher is not there. And I think, and also defining which ones are sick leave, which ones are paid leave, which ones are a task outside of that. So if they're on a committee that's meeting, or which one of them are on long-term leave, so that, yes, that substitute may be there, but that substitute is actually a long-term step. And to me, that's a different thing, because that's not going to impact the learning the same way as, I had a sub one time this week kind of thing.
Sure. Thank you.
I was just going to add, being the person who holds relentlessly to focused monitoring reports, that is also really interesting to us because it speaks to the student impact. So what we can control are mandatory professional developments, which must happen during the school day. So if we were to look at the whole monitoring calendar, which Rich's department manages, we wouldn't say have a 7th grade ELA training and a 7th grade math training on the same day. We just would never do that because you could prevent that. And we would try to make sure that by design, no student's going to have a whole bunch of subs in one particular day. The question about what is the overall impact of, so not the varsity teacher in front of the students, is interesting data, and happy to provide that. And to the calendar question, certainly can link the data that was cultivated for the days before and after all the breaks, because the trend is very clear. The day before any long or extended school vacation is a high absenteeism rate. It jumps by, maybe 4 or 5%. 2 days before, 1 or 2%, and the day after a break is 1 or 2% also. So happy to provide that. Did not intentionally not put it in this report for any reason other than it can absolutely be linked.
So we'll go to Siddharth and then Dr. Mullins.
I think I have a potential explanation for why people might leave the day or before or after a break. And I have noticed this as well, whether it's Thanksgiving break, Christmas break, midwinter break, or summer break, doesn't matter. People leave like that. But I think it might be that people and parents, they go on long vacations and they book their flights during the school day. I think it needs to be made more clear to parents and or whatever guardian students have that it's not good to leave before the break starts, because you're going to lose out. Your kid will lose out on a lot of learning. I think that could be made more clear potentially.
Thank you. Dr. Mullins.
I think on this report, maybe what I would say, and I was trying to go back and compare a little bit with how the last one felt very satisfying and just the structure of the report, that maybe this one feels a little less satisfying because I'm not getting the same sense of if the monitoring is telling us whether these components of structure are working or good or are preferred, or what we might want to suggest about refinements to them. So I think this one, for me, while not bad, just feels a little bit more like perfunctory. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. So I guess I'm always looking for, am I happy or sad in these reports? And in this one, I'm not able to get to, at least from the way the data is positioned. So for me, it's not so much linking the data, but more of the commentary of this last change, or was it successful in our eyes? Or is there some additional revision we think is required in the structure of schools in order to boost the success of the district? So I think it's fine, but that's what I guess I'm struggling with, is just, am I happy or sad? Like, how do I rate the successfulness of the structure of schools? And should we be doing something different in some of these categories?
Sure, that's really helpful feedback. And I think I would just layer on that a family vacation is an allowed school absence on any of the 180 days. So we cannot control that. But the data provided about student absence in the days before and after the extended breaks was really about students, and it just is data. It is just is data. But I think you have a success on a reduction of absences to share.
Yeah, staff absences went down, which for me was very important. That Monday and Tuesday in particular, leading into a longer Thanksgiving break, and they were down by almost 100 certs, lower than the previous year.
Yeah, you need to go back. You can't really count that year. No offense, because that will be a month that we never ever want to remember again from a healthcare standpoint, where every virus known on the planet was circulating around everyone and amongst everyone in the month of November in our state, which brought our hospitals to the brink at that moment in time. So that is going to be an anomaly that will forever be in our data of November to not remember.
That's actually a helpful mention. In case anybody doesn't know, the DOH is still not rolled back on our 5-day absence requirement for anyone who tests positive for COVID either. So that does still have an impact on us. So that exists.
Yep. Same for us. Ours is 10 still. So yeah. Other thoughts? Yeah, Director Morado.
I had one other, and it was on page 3. You know, the section is about trying to read over it. Bell times that meet the district state requirements while considering instructional academic needs, co-curricular, extracurricular activities, and health and well-being at a reasonable cost. And there's a mention of we're blocking time for social emotional learning, or we did. Now that's being integrated to something else. And then there's a long list of what we're doing with that. And I don't know that that necessarily is for this report. It's great information, but if I were looking for this information, I think I would be looking elsewhere and not here for what do we have in our SEL lessons and how are we providing them. So, and I had mentioned this to Superintendent Talia earlier this week, but that really, I think that for me, what's important is how is the schedule and how is that supporting students? So to know that there is a change in 2 nest times to 1 flex time and 1 homeroom, and what that encompasses might be more information. So for me, and so I think that's a bigger issue than here's the points that we were teaching in the SEL lesson. Because now my only curious point is like, well, so where are they getting that now?
Yes. So you're getting to, I guess that point I'm trying to describe is the feels less satisfying because we made this change in the structure. We assumed some flex and nest or homeroom, whatever. We assumed that change would get us some net benefit, SEL in a certain place, whatever. Like, does that work? Like, do we have any way to know that is accomplishing what we went in, and therefore we might do something different? And I'm not suggesting that we would, but I'm saying this one just has sort of less of that ability to understand if we feel good about some of the structure decision points. So it's I think that's a good example.
And I hope that Dr. Moraldo, who's doing our notes for this one, as well as
Don't have a note.
Oh, we don't have, where is the little sheet? Uh-oh. But that we can capture, like, this is where a year from now, when we're doing this, I do want it to be included that Issaquah has changed their structure of having nests and flex, because that is a deviation from what the district approved and why we went to the voters and did the schedule that we are funding out of our levy. And so to what Director Mullins has said is great. So you guys tried this. Did it have a meaningful impact on students? Like, was it a student benefit driven decision, or was it an adult in the building benefit driven decision? So, and obviously this is for still be in arrears. There'll be next year's report to reflect on this year, but that would be a really important piece for us to hear. And I appreciate students elevating that, because again, having not an Issaquah student, I have no idea. Any other thoughts?
I think the other thing, I guess, and maybe this is at some point, the board really looking at what is the purpose for this executive limitation? What are we really driving? So going to Director Mullings, like, if it feels unsatisfactory, some of it might be we don't feel like maybe the right questions are being asked of you now in reflection of what does this really talk to? Are we communicating as a board? Some of the things about preventing the instructional day from being interrupted, maybe that needs to be pulled out from teacher absences, right? Because those are different. I want to know that if there's going to be an assembly, it's interrupting learning. What is the learning that's happening in there? Because that piece isn't mentioned in here anywhere of what kind of assemblies are we having? How often are schools having them? So it feels like that piece is missing. And how do we, as a board, specify that that's one of the things we're looking for, is what learning is happening when school is being interrupted, right? That some of the interruptions are drills that we're required to do. Those are interrupting learning, but that's important because here are the learnings that students are gaining from those. But being able to identify those areas. And the second thing is I feel like elementary is just completely missed from what's going on there. If there's any changes, or if there hasn't been any changes to how elementaries are scheduled, are they different from elementary to elementary? Because I may only know the schedule of how long is my kid spending in math time? How long is my kid spending in PE or math, or understanding, is that across the system the same? Are they different at the schools? Have there been any changes to that lately? Specifying here when teacher conferences are, because that's an interruption to learning. So I feel like there's more information that we probably want, but we may not be clear in the asking. And so that might be some of what's going on.
Any other reflections, thoughts? Yeah. Okay.
This isn't one that I really think is necessary to be answered, but it's just something that I've been thinking about since Aditi and Mia kind of commented, is like, if part of the reason for the Liberty schedule change was to align with the other high schools, why is it important for all of the high schools to have similar schedules? Like, is that necessary, or should the schools their schedules be organized in a way that benefits the students, and the students express and the teachers express benefits them? So that's just a curiosity that I have that I've been thinking about throughout this conversation.
So just directly answer that, it was a decision a long time in coming, and a couple reasons. One is equity in the work time obligations for our staff, so that there wasn't a unequal workload for our teachers at Liberty. And then two is equity in educational delivery of services, so that it isn't that one building has one opportunity with different graduation requirements, was a challenge that the board continued to, I think, feel uncomfortable with. So that was certainly a board-driven decision to align our high schools. And now as we look forward to reimagine high schools and what we could do across our district, having already had that alignment will help us to be able to dream further now that they're on the same schedule. Did I answer your question? Okay. Hearing no more questions and thoughts, there's a motion in front of us. All those in favor of EL 10, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Next, we are to legislative matters. And with that, I will open it up for reflections on Day on the Hill. And if we wanted to lead off with our student reflections first. And was your desire to have it just be from here or up there? I don't. Okay, perfect. So, and I'm going to let this part be run by Director Mullings, since she was there coordinating it all in Olympia.
I am excited about having it start off with student reflections. I'd actually loved if you could go to that podium so we have a good recording of you, because I think it was a big day since he let me have the talking stick. So do you want to start, Leilani?
Hello. So we went to Day on the Hill, and it was an amazing experience. I mean, I've never had an experience like that before. I think it was a very powerful experience to not only connect with the other representatives, so like Siddharth and Nathan, who were also there, but also learn a little bit more about the other board members and be able to talk to them. But also, like, I think for me, the most powerful moment that I experienced was we got to talk to the state senator, and we were like telling her about like different like facts, and we were essentially bringing our experience to her and talking about it. And later we actually got to attend this meeting where she was speaking, and she actually used some of the data that we watched her write down on her notepad that we shared with her.
Senator
So
Wellman.
yeah.
Yep.
So that was really incredible. It was a very powerful and moving moment for me, and I'm very grateful that I got to experience that. So yeah.
Thank you.
I'm just going to echo whatever Leilani just said. I feel it was a great experience for me and for all the student reps in order to bond with each other. And I think that spending that night in a hotel together, I feel that really got us very closely knit. And then I also felt I was able to improve relationships with the board, understand more about each of the board members, and I feel that was a good experience. And then I think the biggest thing, like Leilani said, was talking to the representatives. I think one thing that I really noticed was just how much these representatives actually want to hear student voice, because whatever they're doing is they're doing it for the betterment of the students in their state. And for that reason, I think we were in a great position to do that.
Thank you. But also note that Nathan joined us as well, and Nathan has a role. So he's the secretary of the WASDA Student Network. Am I saying that correctly? And so the event, the Day on the Hill, is across 2 days. Day one being more of a conference style session where you're hearing from key legislators across the state. But it was also an opportunity to have some of those officers of the student network speak in front of the whole group. So Nathan did share, I thought, in a really amazing telling of his story and his connection to some of the items that we were there to speak about as well. So I thought that was really cool. And you guys did a fantastic job. If you have more to say, so you can go back to the mic. It's your time.
I also want to say that being in the state capitol also helped us learn a little bit about how all these laws are made, how a bill has to get through committee, and in general, more about the state. And I feel that was really good and transformative experience that we had.
Thank you. And our students were absolutely amazing at being able to introduce themselves, being able to share their connection to items that were really important, that the district is important to our district. And they were 2 items. So they were about special education funding as well as transportation funding. And I think you did an amazing job of getting from outside of your note cards and introducing yourselves and making it personal and really seeing that come back, right? That you could make a connection, have that level of leader respond to you in that way and use what you had told them pretty immediately. So it was very impressive to watch. I will open up for other board members to comment.
Well, it was my first day on the Hill, and which I greatly enjoyed. My first impressions are, I think, hey, we're very fortunate that we have a group of legislators that touch the district, that are supportive of educational issues, very knowledgeable about the issues, and are sympathetic to, I think, the district's needs by and large. So that was very encouraging to me. The student stories were fantastic. Right on point, related directly to the issues we were talking to the legislators about. And I thought they just really landed very, very well. So, great job to you guys. It was really enjoyable to watch the legislators listen to what you had to say. And I thought that went really, really well. So good for you guys. Having said all that, I think the legislators were pretty honest with us, which I appreciate too, and noting that there probably wasn't going to be a lot coming out of this session on a lot of the issues that we're concerned about. But, we're also, I think, very open to working with us in the future, which will be great experience, I'm sure. And I did note, though, just if we're talking about legislative matters, that the bill that we had discussed a little bit with the legislators about districts being able to take on some indebtedness, that did actually get through the financial cutoff, which I'm encouraged by. So we'll see what the path is on that bill.
First of all, I want to thank our students. Darth and Lilani and Nathan did just an amazing job. You could tell that all of our elected officials were blown away by your comments, both on transportation and on special education funding. And I think it just goes to show that our elected officials want to hear from students, want to hear from our youth, and I think need to. And so it was really important, I think, that we were there, and we were there with our students, specifically advocating for Issaquah School District. I think one thing that I took away from it that was interesting, and I want to applaud Director Mullings for asking this question, but was from our elected officials, was really asking our officials, particularly because we were there with 3 seniors. Tell us your story, which I think was probably interesting. I know that, frankly, was one of the key takeaways for me. It was interesting to hear because it's not a traditional path to move into an elected position like that. And it was really interesting to hear how each of them moved into those roles. And so that was interesting for me. It was also interesting to just being in just as we were moving through the halls, there were so many people. I mean, obviously it was other school boards, other groups of students, because there was the focus on education, but all the other groups that were there with us lobbying for different issues too. I think all of us could agree. I mean, it was fascinating just to watch that movement throughout the day. And, we were lucky to get on, the calendars of each of our elected officials within the 41st and 5th legislative districts. But it was also a reminder to me how busy their days are. And it was a busy day. We didn't get a lot of time with each of them, but we appreciated the time we did get. So it was a great time. I appreciated it. So thank you.
As Director Moraldo mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we're all taking new roles. So for me, it was very different of being the senior board member in the day on the Hill. So that felt really different. Like I had to know things and know where to go. And I think we did pretty okay. We got through it all, but I'm deeply grateful for the time that each of our state legislators spent with us, our 2 state senators, and we saw 4 of our state representatives. They are all deeply interested in our students, in our educational system, and how they support it, and obviously may have differing ability in any given session to do exactly what we're asking for. But I think they were very candid and very kind with their time. And I do appreciate having that little moment to have them share their own sort of career and profession stories with our 3 students. And I hope that added a little, I don't know, personalization, that they are humans as well, right? They're humans with their own individual stories, but also a little inspiration on how do you go from where each of them started to what they do now. So it was a really good day, or 2 days.
I hope our students recognize that advocacy is not a one and done moment, that it's over the course of time, and it's a long game. And, one of the things that we spent a lot of time as school board members back a decade ago was advocating for teacher raises. Our state went through 7 years where they didn't get a cost of living raise at all. And so their purchasing power as teachers plummeted in our state. And so huge investments were made in teacher salaries, which were really necessary. And that took a decade of advocacy for us to get to. So things don't happen. So don't lose heart that they may have said not this year, but they didn't say not never. So that's good. I do want to give a shout out to Bethany for all the coordination that you did of the appointments and reservations and all of that. Those are not easy thing because those are not easy cats to herd. So thank you so much for that. And then before we pivot to federal advocacy, I wanted to see if there's any parts you wanted to insert.
It was a great day in the Hill. It was my second day on the Hill, so it was amazing to sort of see, how we were kind of coalescing around really supporting students, but standing behind you and your stories and your advocacy. Echo, thank you for Bethany Rogers to my right for all the coordination that what really helped us have that day to know where we're going, who we're meeting with, and I was joined by Martin Turney as well. So he, not only were you a carpool leader, Martin, you also served as a key resource for the data that the students could then refer to and prepare. I know that there was some preparation in the sort of commuting time to set you up for whatever questions you might have had as well of Martin. So thank you.
And unfortunately I didn't get to join any of you guys there. That Sunday morning I did lead the WASDA Large Schools Caucus meeting in the morning and then headed off to meet Director Moraldo. And so I will hand it off to her.
Yes, so while you all were on one day on the Hill, there were no students on the other day on the Hill. In Washington, D.C., had to keep saying the other Washington. But we did have conversations with our legislators, and of course, the key priority always goes back to special education and the full funding of IDEA, which we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of that legislation when the federal government said that they would fund 40% of the costs. This year, they've gone, when I started advocacy, they were at 17%. They've gone all the way up to 13%, which if you are very good at math, is the wrong direction. So there's just conversation around that. And, I shared with some of the legislators that you show what you care for by where you spend your money. And I think to me, that's the deepest thing is what we say when we say students with special needs, we're not going to put our money there because that tells us as a society how we're going to treat them. So to me, it is a moral issue, not just a financial one. And our district is doing the best we can to go beyond a compliance model, which is really IDEA. The legislation itself has not fundamentally changed. And we continue to do work. When we talk about universal design for learning, that is specifically what we mean, giving kids the most fair and appropriate public education and not sticking them in a room somewhere and hoping that they learn. Right? We're really integrating them into our systems because that's what we want to do as a community, is to ensure that regardless of your ability to learn or other intellectual abilities, that you are a part of our community. And we do that through universal design for learning. So we talked about that. I think I'm trying to remember that. I know that there was another key thing, but we started talking about artificial intelligence and its impact and how it was interesting because the following day, as I was also on the Hill for another reason, I walked by as Bill Gates came out of the Senate building. So he was clearly there on a hearing talking about technology. Mr. Zuckerberg was there as well that day. So I did not see him, but that was a social media day. And we really did talk about the impacts of social media, so technology as a whole, and the impact of AI. We know that as a system, we have run into what happens when a student uses AI to develop inappropriate pictures, sometimes including the likeness of other students and posting that on social media. And really, and that comes down to ownership. Who owns your likeness is one situation. Another one that was brought up by Lake Washington, because when we go there, we have our colleagues from across the state, and Lake Washington talking about they wanted to purchase it basically an AI for their system. That was safe. Because we have to start talking about student information and student data. And when you generate a question, a prompt in AI, who owns the prompt, who owns the response? You know, so when you create something, then who owns that? And is it safe? So where is it getting its data and how do you know it's safe? And there's some applications out there, some different AIs that are kind of like a safe sandbox so that you're not getting material back that's inappropriate for you to be getting. At the cost, Lake Washington said they were quoted $12 million. And that's for students and for staff. And like, where would we even come up with an extra $12 million? That's a huge chunk of our budget. So there's some discussion around who's going to fund that, what kind of things are available to us, how are we going to protect students, what about their student data? So Comiga, which is run by Sal Khan, who's of Khan Academy, you might have heard of. So he has a software AI called Comiga. But he even talked about it the last time when we saw him at ASU GSV, he talked about every time you reinitiate a conversation with the AI, it doesn't know who you are because they can't store student data. So the student is unique every single time. So how do you get machine learning if the machine can never learn who you are? Because we need to protect your data and from who. So there's a lot in there. And I think our best conversation was with Senator Cantwell's staff, because Senator Cantwell is very interested in this. She was unfortunately in the air flying, so she couldn't join us. But it was, I think, some really interesting things that were talked about and shared about this time around. And I didn't go, neither of us went to any of the agency discussions that were on Wednesday, but WASDA members did meet with the Department of Education, which they've done every year since I've been going. And they also met with the FCC and with the Department of Agriculture.
Thank you. Thank you for all your work on NSBA and shepherding that organization. Just specifically, we were advocating for House Bill 4519. And if any of you know Representative Congresswoman Kim Schreier, she's the only Democratic Congresswoman or man in our state that hasn't co-sponsored this bill. So we did talk with her directly that day about the importance of, even if the bill doesn't have any chance of making a meaningful impact this year, planting your flag for the importance of that is something that we want to make sure that we emphasize to our Congresswoman who represents our school district based on our location in the 8th of its importance. Siddharth.
This is a small thing, but could you please clarify what that House bill, which you just stated, talks about?
I was just listing it by name, but it's what Director Moraldo stated, which is the federal government initially back almost 50 years ago said that we will provide 40% of funding for all special education budget that each school district in our country spends. And to date, last year was 13%. So if we had that 27% of additional federal funding that we were promised, we would be able to deliver all sorts of things to our school district that our community would really like. So that's why it matters. And that's why we will continue to fight for every dollar we can for all of you all. So. That's a question. Okay. Perfect. Alrighty. Any other comments on legislative matters? I will just say that I was contacted by one of our senators about the bill that was in front of the legislature in committee hearing for sales tax rebate for capital bond work in districts. And the question before was, there was no one from our lobbyist organization who spoke in that hearing. So that will be something for you to follow up on. But wanted to elevate that as the question is really, what value are we getting by that? And maybe we should just have a student do it instead. Okay. Alrighty. So the next item is announcements and correspondence. No. Okay. And then calendar and future agenda topics. So those dates are still not going to work. I'm sorry. But I do want to announce that on Monday, April 29th is when WASDA's Northern DA2 meeting is going to be held from 5:30 to 8 p.m. And we are going to host. So if you can mark your calendars for that. Monday, April 29th from 5:30 to 8. Right here. And then so that one that is listed in November is on a Wednesday, which I'm definitely not available. So I'm sorry.
So it's the November 13th date, not the December 11th date. There's a conflict. Okay.
Is there other dates around that like week that we could look at besides Wednesday, or was that a hard and fast?
This is very hard to calendar, as
I
you
know,
know,
but we're
so
trying to do it way in advance, but
we'll have to come back to the board on some
like Wednesdays
proposals.
are near impossible for me. Certainly the second Wednesdays of the month are always impossible. So
This is what happens when you try to schedule them earlier. You run into scheduling conflicts.
well, that's what we're trying to do, get out ahead of them, so at least we can do that. Any other calendaring that we need to have awareness of? Okay. As you guys are thinking about that, I wanted to bring up, so future agenda topic. So as EL 12 looms, I think there's some key data pieces that we need to ask for early on. And I think that one of the reasons why this has been not so satisfying, I can't say it as eloquently as Director Mullins did, like about EL 10, is sometimes maybe we're not asking the right questions. I think we've asked the right questions in EL 12, but I think one of the things that would help us prepare for that, since the focus is we're going to pivot this year to amazing student outreach for homework and the impact of homework. And it was funny that Superintendent and I were in a meeting with the PTSA leaders, and they brought up their concern about tutoring and the equity or inequity of access to tutoring that you have to pay for. And that was literally what we had talked about the week before. So I love that part and getting that information, but I don't want to lose sight of the grading part. And I think one of the things that would help the board is for the core subjects in like the core 24 graduation requirements. So language arts, math, social studies, and science, just to start there. If we could see the department grading policies for all of our schools for those subjects. And I think getting those from since this is monitoring, so this would be from last year, so we don't need this year's because this is for what last year would be, I think, really helpful for us to start to formulate our questions and responses. That I think it's going to be a long conversation, and I'd rather sort of get that here. But in general, if we're gonna ask for different data or whatever, it's helpful for our superintendent to hear early on rather than even the month before, because this is these 12 and 16 are big reports as far as impact to students. So I wanted to open up, those were something that I was interested in, but wanted to bring it to the board for one, other things you may be interested in, two, head nods this way or this way, so we can get a sense.
I actually want to maybe hearken back to our public comment earlier this morning about executive functioning, as that's a hot topic for me at the moment, and has really been solidified for me as a key component in the learning environment, and how impactful our supports are how we use our infrastructure to help support different levels of executive functioning. Maybe I'll say that. And so while if you look at the EL, we talk about the homework practices, the grading practices. I think historically we've talked about that as the output of those things, like how much homework is it, or what is the grade, and can someone redo something? I really do think we have to have more conversation and more clarity on, are we using the infrastructure we have in our school district in order to provide an environment where students can be more clear and can execute in a more structured way on those items, like their assignments to turn in for grades, their homework and completion. And I think it's just super clear to me that the lack of consistency in how we're leveraging our learning management tools is a key piece of this learning environment that I really think we need to dig into. I think the way it's come up in previous conversations has been people sort of anecdotally talking about the assignment of homework on Fridays. I think that's a good point, but I think it fits in a greater context, which is what is the expected runway of students to see upcoming work? How do they see that displayed to them? Is that consistent in a way that doesn't require very advanced skills of executive functioning to manage across multiple classes? And so for me in this one, I really do want to get into learning environment, for me, I have a new layer on that, which is the tools, the infrastructure, and the consistency with which we're surfacing student work, and how we can be better leveraging that to make sure students at all abilities, particularly executive functioning, can be successful in our system.
So getting at more of the structural piece and where that fits into our curriculum, or
yeah, I mean, the example in our public comment was giving every student, are we giving every student a planner? I don't know that that's a solution to a problem. I think for me, it is how that end piece happens, even that you're transferring. If for me, right, if I gave every student a planner and I'm a planner personality, that puts the onus on the student to transcribe what that is into a physical planner. We actually have and own and have deployed the tools in which consistent application of assignments, registering them, entering them, timing and around them actually produces that for the student. And I think we need to look at how are we leveraging the technology we've deployed, whether it's the one-to-one, everybody's holding a device, whether it's consistent use of our learning management systems to create an environment. Right now we have, I believe one of the barriers we have is the executive functioning of the student, and we're dependent and maybe even flippant. Well, they should learn how to do that. But what if that isn't in there? We don't say that about other potential challenges for our students. So I think we need to look at how are we really leveraging the infrastructure we have and have deployed to make sure we're removing basic barriers of student management of their day, or at least knowingly know what we're doing or not doing. And today I'm not sure that's clear.
got it. That's why it's important. I think this is like EL16 going to become a bigger and bigger part of our reporting, because it's an EL that really directly impacts students. I would add to that as well is, again, when we're talking about this early, so I know for Director Taylor and Director Coyne, we're not trying to expect you to be like, oh, let's weigh in on this because you've never seen this before, but we want to elevate early. is what's come up multiple years over this is what is mastery? And multiple attempts to demonstrate mastery has come up over and over. And I've heard it from our building leaders. I've heard it from teachers. But in page 2 of your introductory document this year, you guys really talk about that. And there's like, they make reference to University of Chicago research. So it seems like we need to clearly define mastery as a level of something that's consistent based on what you have in E2. And so it seems like either the administration needs to, or the board needs to, someone needs to come out and say what that is, because I think that's part of why we see such wide variability still in our grading practices, even amongst in a single department, because the interpretation isn't there for our teachers and our department leaders and building leaders to know and hold to. Back to what I heard Director Moines talk about in the work study about the taxonomy part and having common definitions. This is one that needs to be readily defined. And if it's not something that, so I think as we lead up to EL 12, we need to figure out how that's going to be defined, and whether that's going to be defined either by board policy or by superintendent interpretation. And I don't care, but I think we've had enough, I think, squishiness to know that we're going to have to figure out something. So aligning with this makes sense to me. If A and B is, A's and B's are what identify the greatest confidence in learning and preparedness, and it says confidence in depth of learning and readiness is less than when students score in the C range. That tells me, again, we're not talking about passing, and we're not talking every student has to retake something, but if the level of mastery is A's or B's, and that should be the threshold. C's is passing. And we've heard even, well, D is passing, D is not necessarily indicative of learning to the depth that we would want our students to learn. So I think there's work there to be done as we lead up to spring, and we should figure out how we're gonna approach that, because I think we need to eliminate the undefined part, because that not having that definition, like even in our strategic plan for like what is authentic engagement, not having the definition for what is mastery, I think is contributing to what we see is the lack of being able to hold to a standard. Start.
I think I just want to add on something what I was thinking. I think for classes which are sequenced and for which like there's a higher level class, I think a good thought about mastery would be, if I got this grade, like, am I ready for the next class? And will I be able to succeed in that class? Like, I feel that might be useful in those types of classes.
I agree, that would be great. Not all of our classes are necessarily sequenced, so we would need to have a standard that would be applicable across disciplines.
Just on the subject of like defining standards and stuff, I think that's something that I've heard come up in meetings several times on different topics, and it's something that I bumped into specifically with my monitoring report, is that the way that we talk in the reports and in the standards that we set for our district, it needs to be less aspirational language and more quantitative expectations, because it becomes very difficult to even ask questions if you don't have a standard off which to base those questions. So that I think that applies not only in like this case of like what is mastery, but comes up in a lot of places across the ELs and ends.
Yeah. Nothing else I need to say after that.
What happened?
Other thoughts, Director Moraldo? Yeah. Exactly.
I wanted to go back to what Director Mullings was talking about, because I think it actually is an important issue around some of the skills required for learning. But I don't know where I would put it in this EL. I think learning environment is definitely the place to put it, but I don't know that we have a section right now. So I think part of the conversation needs to be, what does that look like? And I'm thinking learnings around what is executive functioning? How do you utilize it? I agree that a planner is a solution, and not every student's going to have the same solution. So how do you individualize that? But for me, it also goes with a lot of the project management. So I would say that the Gibson X students know more about project management, because if you're going to do project-based learning, that's going to be a key component that you should have learned at the beginning. And if you didn't, let me know, because you really need some project management. What is project management? But every single student here has a project or teams that they're working with. And what are some of the skill sets that they need to be able to manage? You're going to have this thing due at the end. And somewhere in our system, whether it's how do we start it? How do we describe it at the elementary level? What does it look like as it's leveled? What does that look like at the middle school? Because that's where you really start to get into my homework's not just dependent on my own learning, but the learnings of others and working with others and skills that I may not have developed, especially in middle school, trying to work with others that I may or may not like. That's very challenging. How do you get that accomplished? So I think there's some areas of the learning environment and things that we're tasking you to do for your overall learning, but there's no way that I'm measuring that. And I don't know what's being done in the system around those things. But I'd say if you talk about projects and about how to stay organized, those two are fundamental to being able to learn, just like reading and knowing how to do arithmetic is.
I mean, yes. And I would like to build on that to say is, I would love to know the correlation of grade performance and access to online textbooks. How many kids who are scoring less than that, our mastery mark, have ever accessed their online textbook, or at what rate to their peers who score higher? Those are things we can know. And it gets to, are they able to operate in their learning environment? Are they able to access the information? I would like to know, and probably because I know this for my own at the moment, what is the consistency of, back to project management? Part of managing your coursework is understanding what's ahead of you and being able to work back to know what do I need to do to prepare for that next milestone? So what percentage of our courses have future assignments listed in Canvas? Right? There's things we can know about what is happening in our environment that, and you're right, we may not have asked for what I'm saying. So that may be an additive to the conversation, but the tech isn't just to complete the activity. We've got other things we can know because it's deployed.
And that's why I think we probably do have two bullets to add. One about the learning management system. And so when we wrote this EL or overhauled it, that didn't even exist. That wasn't even part of, and it's being used so wildly different across every class, at least at Skyline High School. I can't speak for any other school. That I think so. It's a yes about learning management tool, and yes also about how are our students learning executive functioning skills, because those are important parts that sounds like we want every student to walk out of our system with. And so then the question is, does it belong in an EL or does it belong in an end? Which sounds like we can carve out some time in our retreat to talk about that when we're talking about our policies and reviewing them. So that can be one of the pieces. Sorry.
No, I'm just going to mention, kind of tack on some of the data that we could pull. I'd also add on how often a parent has logged into Canvas too, is also a piece that, but again, I don't know if that would necessarily fit within EL 12 or not, but I do think that's a key component. I mean, that to see if, the parents engaged with it. Yeah.
Okay. I think we're done, right?
Okay, just to recap, I heard this as an agenda topic request in advance of EL 12. And then taking some of the questions that kind of have been raised.
Well, I think it's more to start building the data collection for what will be EL 12. And then that way we can probably, once the data is collected, we can schedule a work study for it.
That's fair. I also heard lots of data requests. So we'll have to call through that because we don't know yet what the viability and or ease of getting that data is. And that is dramatically new data, right, to consider. So thank you.
Yeah. If there's nothing else, we are adjourned.